Thank you. Yeah, so welcome everyone. Uh, and just as a warning, Paul is streaming this to YouTube, so bear that in mind if you don't want to say something too personal. Um, and yeah, so in this network meeting, we're going to be looking at one of the 10 principles, which is integration. Uh, and just to lay out how we're going to structure this. So firstly, I'm going to spend about 5 minutes just introducing the topic so that everyone has an idea. And then Father Michael Butler is going to give a 10-minute talk on integration. There'll then be an opportunity to ask myself and Father Michael any questions, and then we'll go into an open discussion where we can share our experiences and learn from each other. And what we're hoping from this discussion is partly just to communicate the idea of integration, communicate some ideas about it, learn from each other about what works, what doesn't, and also get some ideas for developing the principle further, because these principles are always being iterated on. So we want to see if we can learn something from this. So yeah, what do we mean by integration? So the manifesto principle is written as our work addresses man as a whole, not as a collection of parts. Man is an inseparable unity of mind, body, and spirit. So obviously integration has a sense of being integrated, and words related to it, things like wholeness, a unity, things like that. I think also balance is another word that helps us get at it. A balance among different parts, for example. And the opposite of integration is some kind of disintegration, some kind of fragmentation or separateness or internal conflict, or fluctuating wildly between different behaviors and so on. And I think I think it's not helpful to like define the term super tightly, but there's like a few ways we can think about it. So one way of thinking about integration is the idea of a reduction in internal conflict. So everyone's had the experience of different parts pulling in different directions, and that can get really severe if you've got really strong parts pulling one direction versus another. You see this in addiction, where someone has a part that takes over and does things that they normally, on reflection, wouldn't want to do. And that is a kind of internal conflict. I think also self-hatred, self-attacking kind of internal experience is another kind of disintegration and kind of collapse of wholeness. And this can include quite broad parts of yourself. I think a lot of us feel a separation between body and mind, or body, mind, and spirit. And so integrating those big chunks of your experience or of your life is a big part of integration. Related to that is the idea of integrating parts that you might have suppressed. So often a man might suppress his anger, which has some benefits in some ways, but also leads to him losing energy, losing drive, losing the ability to assert boundaries. Sexuality is another one that can often be suppressed in an unhelpful way. And bringing those parts in, not in a way to let them run rampant, but in a way that fits with the rest of your life, is a kind of integration. That's often called shadow work, because these kinds of things sit in the shadows. There's also an idea of integrating around some highest value or vision or purpose. And this is most obvious in religious purposes. You might integrate around following God, following a spiritual path. And this allows lots of your parts to pull together. So in the religious context, you might serve God through your family or through your work or through your friendships in every moment. And so all these different parts of yourself are integrated and kind of pulling in one direction. And finally, the term is often used to refer to integrating a transformative experience. So you might have a spiritual experience or a psychedelic experience or do a rite of passage or something like this. And in order to retain and not forget what you've learned, you need to do some process of pulling that into your life, making it real in your life, of allowing it to change your life and not just be an experience kind of sitting on its own. And I think the consequences of being integrated, apart from what I've already mentioned of less internal conflict, is a lot more energy, like it unleashes energy because you don't have this kind of fighting with yourself. You know your direction. You have a sense of wholeness and inner peace to some degree. So that's just setting the scene a little bit. And I'll hand over now to Father Michael for his talk.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for a really nice introduction there. You covered a lot of ground. Said a few things that I intended to say and set up the rest of it very well. So Richard and I did not communicate beforehand for that. He's just good. And I appreciate it. Yes, everything that he said, I think I can affirm. And that I would just add maybe this other piece, that integration for us does seem to require a kind of single unifying principle of some kind, something around which we organize our life, our psyche, our vision. And when we lose sight of that, or when the center isn't there anymore, that's when disintegration results. That it reminds me, it may be new to you, but for native English speakers, William Butler Yeats' poem, The Second Coming, comes immediately to mind when we talk about things like this. You probably know it. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are filled with passionate intensity. That's not a bad image of disintegration, and it's precisely that. When we cannot hear the falconer, when we can no longer hear the highest principles in our own life, when we lose sight of vision, or in the case of younger men, when they have never come up with a vision for their lives, either because they've never considered it or they're too busy running away from their pain to come up with a positive vision for their life, they find they live in chaos, which breeds anxiety, disorder, and generally a sense of trying to run away and to self-medicate their lives, because clearly life, as Richard put it, as integration releases energy because we're not fighting against ourselves. So being internally conflicted or without direction makes it more difficult for us to lead fruitful and optimal lives. Disintegration on the physical level includes things like sickness, strife and war, even here environmental destruction, when we're not concerned about those sorts of things. On the psychological level, mental illness of all kinds, separation and division between people, and in yourself, isolation, and a kind of atomic individualism, which I see as kind of a real plague. And one of the reasons why I appreciate doing men's work is precisely to be able to get in contact with other guys and to overcome sort of the self-imposed isolation that comes from a strong streak of individualism, which I know it's prevalent in Western Europe, but I mean it's sort of held up as a really positive American trait, and I don't think it's anything that positive at all. I think it's carried way too far and is resulting in a serious isolation, harm to people who end up living with it. On the spiritual level, disintegration is closely related with the demonic. Prime example for that, if you know the story in the Gospel of the Gadarene demoniac, the man who lived in the city of the Gadarenes. So he didn't live in the city, he lived among the tombs, buck naked, because he was possessed by demons, broke his chains, went around totally mad and crazy. And the curious thing in the story is that when Christ appears and he asks him, "What is your name?" And the demon replies, "My name is Legion, because we are many." And you see, he answers first in the singular and then secondly in the plural. And you see the multiplicity and the breakdown of his entire personality there, that the man is just frenzied. And no wonder he can't keep his life together, because he's inhabited by so many things. So the demonic is there when we find disintegration. And very often in our own lives, when we're not holding ourselves together well, or we don't have adequate containment for our lives or good structure to uphold us together, what results? We usually get into trouble. That's the time that happens. I mean, even in simple things, they'll talk in recovery movements, for example, In America, we'll talk about halts. When you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or stressed, those are the times that you're going to fall back into addictive patterns and bad behaviors and all. So again, when the good structures are not there, when our ego is weakened, when we're overwrought, exhausted, that's when we're likeliest to get into trouble. And that's when disintegration is going to get a toehold on us. Okay. So one of the things that, at least in Christian thought, as Richard pointed out, in religious circles, is that or unifying higher principle or something. For example, the gospel is a way of providing integration and order. Again, as I said at the beginning, integration seems to require a single unifying principle, and if we can find that in God, for example, that provides the unifying principle that we are looking for, because he is in fact it. In Christian terms, that's of course the person of Christ. And it is part of the work of Christ not only to be saving individual persons, but if I can riff here for just a second on some of the deep theology of one of the Eastern Fathers, Saint Maximus the Confessor, on whom I'm a longtime disciple and a mild expert. He actually says that the work of Christ when he came to save the world was in fact to reconcile 5 things that had become disintegrated and had fallen apart as a result of the fall of man. And he says those 5 things are Christ came to reconcile, first of all, the masculine and the feminine. It's very curious. The second place, the second mediation that he performs is between the inhabited earth where we live and paradise, which you have an environmental concern. That's where Maximus addresses that. After the paradise in the inhabited world, heaven and earth, and then the intelligible and the sensible creations, which is the realm of the angels and the realm of the created physical world, and then finally the uncreated and the created realm. So it reunites the separation between God and his creation entirely. So even in Christianity, there are fundamental patterns of reintegration and bringing everything back together into unity. To be sure, again, allow me a moment further to riff on Christian theology. Yes, the Word of God is the principle of differentiation and of separation between things, but it's the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, which provides unity, so that we have unity in multiplicity that doesn't fly off into disintegration and doesn't collapse everything into a kind of homogeneous sameness that preserves our own uniqueness in our relationships to each other and to God. So enough of that. Even taking it out of the religious context, though, vision, a personal vision for your own life, seriously considered and thoughtfully worked through, can serve very, very well as an integrating principle for our whole lives. And even if it's beyond a personal vision, that maybe concerns simply vocational aspirations or aspirations for having a family or whatnot, if your vision includes something transcendent, a really transcendent purpose for your life, something that is in genuine and like in selfless service and providing genuine value to the rest of the world around you, it can be enough to organize everything else in your life, to give clarity for your purpose, to allow you to say no to a lot of things that otherwise might distract your time and take your attention away from things that are more important, and provide a solid foundation for carrying your life forward. And at least for those of you younger men who maybe aren't married yet, you can say, look, you can say to a potential life partner, look, here's the direction I'm going. This is what my life is about. This is the kind of man I am. This is the adventure I'm on. Would you like to be a part of it? And then it can give you, some good direction even for a romantic relationship as well. So there's a bunch of disparate and kind of thrown together ideas there. But again, I guess to be integrated in summing it all up, then a unifying vision, a principle of some kind that helps to hold your life together and helps that you can organize yourself around, is going to be fundamental to keeping yourself together. So, I don't know where the discussion will go after this, but, I would be really curious personally to hear the kinds of principles or visions or goals that each of you have, that you found that's been helpful to carry your life forward. I'll shut up at that and let everybody else speak.
Thank you very much. Um, that was yeah, very enlightening. I just wanted to ask a question first to you, which is um, what have you seen that makes it difficult or that blocks men from finding a vision or where that vision goes wrong somehow?
I think what blocks a lot of men from finding vision is I mentioned it in passing, particularly for younger men, is that they're too busy running away from their pain. Um, excuse me. For a lot of men, one of the phrases that I've begun to use regularly that seems to have a lot of resonance with the men that I talk to is I will tell these younger guys, so 15 years of smoking weed and playing video games and jerking off to porn have not been the best preparation for life, has it? And they just go, yeah, father, do you have to hit so close to the bone on that? Because they're, every single young man seems to be suffering from the same sort of thing. But a lot of what they're doing, not that I, categorically opposed to guys playing video games. I'm rather categorically opposed to pornography. I will say that. But even for the video games, no, it's not a problem. There is when you use anything in your life as a means of escape and avoiding real responsibility and real relationships and self-medicating or checking out. If you're spending every weekend, watching football games on the television rather than engaging with your wife and your kids, that's a problem. Okay. You're just avoiding relationships and you're using sports as a way to do it. So it could be any sort of thing that avoids that. But a lot of young men have not learned how to stand in the fire, as it were, to confront the pain or the misery in their own lives and to learn to bear that. And they haven't learned that by standing in the fire, sort of the phrase I like to use, and to realize that no, it's not going to kill them and they're not going to go crazy, and that there's real growth and there's real maturity on the other side of that pain. But you have to do, and so a lot of men's work is concerned with sort of very gently, scraping away some of those layers of pain so that men can then, mature and get on with their lives. I think that's one of the fundamental reasons why they don't have a vision. Secondly, perhaps we just get lazy or we get complacent. We're okay with our 9 to 5. We don't mind. Our relationship with our woman is good enough, and we just sort of float down the river, as it were. The problem with it is you wake up when you're 50 or 55 years old and realize, damn, you have wasted decades of your life and didn't accomplish much with it. I remember an old figure on television years ago here in America pointed out, dead bodies float downstream. It takes live bodies to resist the current. And when men can wake up and learn to swim, that they have to resist the current, that's when they begin to make some progress in their lives. Regrettably, I think a lot of guys, you kind of have to hit rock bottom or things have to get really bad before they wake up. But nobody really wants to change until we have to. And some of us can take a hell of a lot of misery before we're willing to change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a kind of important point of like you said, standing in the fire. Like the integration process can be really difficult, and there's a lot of yeah, it's a challenging thing to do.
It
Uh,
is, and it takes a while, and,
yeah,
and that's it. Give yourself some, cut yourself some slack. This is work of a lifetime, really. Especially in, if you want to put it in psychological terms, as Richard was pointing out, doing shadow work. There are layers and layers and layers of that to be gotten through. That shouldn't be daunting. You shouldn't say, oh my God, if I can't do it in a weekend, then just throw in the towel. It's not even worth trying. No, any bit of work, shadow work, or work on yourself that you can do is going to improve the quality of your life. It will give you more energy, as Richard pointed out, because you're not self-conflicted. You're not using a lot of your resources fighting against yourself or working against your own best interest. Every little bit helps, and it doesn't take that much work to begin to see real benefits in your life. So please don't hesitate to do the work.
yeah, I just want to now open up the floor. Any questions from anyone for Father Michael, and then we'll spend about 10 minutes on questions, and then go into more of an open discussion.
Nobody has anything.
I can be the one to chime in if no one else is going to dive in. I saw Dietmar just joined us as well, so I'm curious if he has anything to add to this as well. Hey, Dietmar. But the question I have, Father Michael, is what you said right at the end of your talk about relationship with a woman. And I think what you touched on is something like it's really good for a man to figure out who he is and where he wants to go before he creates that relationship with a woman. And also, it's one of the things that will make a man most attractive to a woman, because the woman wants to know who this guy is and what in the long term, like what is she buying into? And so a man who knows where he's going is very attractive. Is that the way you see it? And yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on that dynamic?
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, you summarized it exactly. And one of the things, or some of the things that women look for in a man, is direction, and they really do look for protection and providing. So if a man knows where he's going and he has a clear sense of what his purpose in life is, that, yeah, okay, he's stable, he's got a job, he knows where he's going, that provides an immense sense of safety, for a woman to look at, as opposed to a guy who's just sort of floating around doing this and that or the other, and, not centered. Because if a man is not centered, he doesn't provide a kind of stability that a lot of women find attractive in a man. If he doesn't have a clear direction for his life, why does she want to get hitched up with this if you don't know which way the wagon is going? So to have a clear vision that, honey, that's where I'm headed. If it's interests you, come along for the ride. It's going to be a great adventure. And also, having a clear vision for your life keeps you from making a woman the vision and the purpose of your life, which is a big mistake a lot of guys make. In men's work, they call it pedestalization, putting a woman up on a pedestal. In religious terms, we have a much sturdier word for that. It's called idolatry. Okay. And we don't want to put women up on a pedestal, because if she's up here, you're going to be down here. And no woman wants to look down at the man that she's dating or married to. Okay. So you got to be real careful about where you put your woman. All right. You need to be the prize, guys. You can do that.
Which doesn't mean that you shouldn't love your woman intensely and be willing to sacrifice your life for her. But it's just like, she's not. It's really it's the fetishization. I mean, and I think pornography plays a very large role in this. Is like guys fetishize women through watching a lot of pornography, and they get obsessed by it, and then they look for some woman to try and do this, and they're willing to compromise on their purpose, on their vision, on their meaning for being, in order to just find some woman that can fulfill this need that they're feeling inside of themselves. And a man who is not wanting to compromise in that way, that I think people mistakenly think, well, that's the alpha male or something like that. No, it's just a guy who's clear about what's important in life, right? And then he's looking for a woman that also understands that and will support him in that, instead of taking away from it somehow.
Yeah, and any man worth his salt who has a good vision for his own life will also want a woman who has a clear vision for hers. Mm-hmm. And then together, you're mutually supportive in that. And if it works well, it's a beautiful thing.
Can I ask a question, Father Michael?
Please.
Yeah, my name is Marty. You were telling about the boys that you are asking the question, hey, what have you done with your life so far? It seems that those younger men are already aware that something is not right, that this is not the way they want to live. Is there something before that as well? When they are aware of that this is not the way they want to live, then they are more open to change. But before that, they have that insight. Is there something you can do, we can do, I can do to help them by giving them a nudge to open up, like, hey, is this the life that I want?
Yes and no. I think when young men are before they hit their mid-20s, maybe. So if you're looking at teenage guys, high school, maybe even college age. College is perhaps the beginning of where you can really do some work with them. When they're younger, or in college, some guys come to enough maturity to realize, no, I need to straighten my life up. I have a direction I want to go. I put all of this time and effort into a degree. Maybe I better actually do some homework and get a degree so I can go out and get the job and have the life that I want. For younger guys in their teens, I think as much as possible to provide good examples of strong, clear masculinity to them, to take genuine interest in the lives of younger men, and always to be in anything that you can find in a younger man's life to be encouraging. This is something that I try to tell guys all the time, because sometimes I will sometimes get it. Oh, Father Michael, you're old, you got gray hair, so yeah, it's easy for you to encourage younger men, or and you're a priest, so you can give a blessing. That's your job. You're ordained and paid to do that, and it doesn't have to be. Do you know how much it means to a 16-year-old boy when some guy in college gives him a compliment, or praises him for something that he does, or gives a word of encouragement? It means a huge amount, because that college guy is the place where the younger one wants to be, and he still looks up to him. You can always give a word of encouragement, a word of blessing to another man, and to be sincere about it, and to take, especially if you have younger men in your life, children, grandchildren, nephews, cousins, something like that, maybe even younger men that you work with, always to be encouraging, to recognize and acknowledge the good qualities and traits that they have, and to point them out. And yeah, sometimes they need a little knock upside the head when they're really mucking up, but for the most part, most guys get beat up enough, in my experience, and it's not that they suffer so much from pride or from too much confidence. Most of the younger guys that I see suffer from a lack of self-esteem and a very poor sense of themselves. So anything you can do to lift them up and to give them courage and strength, I think is incredibly good work. And it's something every one of us can do. We just have to think to do it when the opportunity is right there in front of us.
And when now you're talking about teenagers, if you have mid-20s, and it can be that someone is a bit stuck, maybe very stuck in his self-pity and sees no solutions, you can always give him a compliment or whatever, but yeah, is there something else?
When you get to about your mid-20s, this is, even neurologically, this is when the prefrontal cortex begins to develop fully in young men, where executive function works, where long-range planning, goal setting begin to become a little easier for them to do. In this case, a little encouragement, it can go a long way. But for those men, that's about the time when most young men begin to be agitated and say, no, this is not what I want. There's got to be more for life. I want my life to mean something. And so if you can help them to find vision, a purpose, meaningful job, if that's where you need to work, because I don't know how it is where you are, where in the Netherlands, in America, I still come across men in their mid and late 20s who are living in their parents' basement, watching television and covered in potato chip dust, because they don't do much of anything. And to encourage them, no, because as the greatest satisfaction that we have in men is providing value to somebody else. It's not in self-fulfillment. It's being useful to others. It's providing good, excellent service to somebody. It's doing a very good job. It's providing for your family, creating good art, but it's always out there and directed at other people. And so for a lot of the younger men, they need to be encouraged. No, go out there and do something for somebody else. Go out there, in case, go get a job, earn your own money, and it will get you a long way. If I can throw, I don't know that Maslow was wrong with his pyramid of needs. I think Maslow, you need to provide for some of those basic things too. But by God, after a point, you need to quit relying on your parents, for your every meal, and to provide for yourself, because a great deal of self-esteem comes, as we know, as men, comes from providing for ourselves. I did hear someone who did say something very simply. He said he did not have a program so much for young men, but he did encourage three things in them. He said, first off, go get freakishly strong. So go and work out, because all of the lessons you will learn in the gym will translate over to the rest of your life. Second, go get a job. Learn to earn some money, because once a young man begins to get a taste for a paycheck, he'll want one from that point on, and he'll appreciate the advantages of having money, that they are better than being broke all the time. And the third thing that was recommended was go out and put yourself in situations where you have to encounter all different kinds of people from all different backgrounds and all kinds of walks of life. And if you learn to relate to all kinds of different people, that's one of the most valuable life skills you'll have. And that's for a simple thing, that's not a bad program. For a lot of guys, though, at least in America, they're still kind of stuck in front of their screens or playing their video games, or they don't get out as much. There's a whole lot of isolation, especially after COVID. A lot of people lost out of those even going to a coffee shop to hang out for a while. I found I quit doing that even. I haven't done it in 5 years now. And young men get isolated, or they don't have a job, or they just do something very minimal. No, go out and do something and learn the joys not only of making money, but of providing genuine value for someone else. That's incredibly satisfying. I hope you found it for yourself, Marty. So encourage the guys to do that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. Dan, go.
Yeah, what resonated with me was this example of laziness and flowing down the river. So do you have maybe some clues or ways out of this state of adoption of everything and laziness?
Yeah, probably. I hate to say it, but like I said earlier, most men don't change until they have to. So the pain of staying the same will eventually become so great that the pain of change will look like a blessing, and they will begin to do that. A lot of times, parents are not doing their sons favors by allowing them to be lazy at the house, or not encouraging them to get a job, or not encouraging them to go to school to learn a skill, to get a good education. So, and I don't know, particularly as you say, I see you're 26 years old, man, if all of your friends are just sitting around playing video games and smoking weed all weekend, or getting drunk, you might need a new circle of friends, because there's a commonplace in some of the self-help literature, that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you're just hanging around with people whose lives are going nowhere, you're not going to be the exception. You're really not. You need to hang around with people who are better than yourself and who will push you, which is the great blessing of things like Maniphesto Core here, that you can get with other men who know they're not satisfied with their own life and are willing to work hard. And not only am I willing to work hard, but I'm willing to see to it that you work hard, and to call you out if I find that you're lazy, and so encourage you to do what you need to do so that your life is better as well. Because when your life's better, mine is too.
Thanks.
I hope it helps.
I'd like to switch now to hearing a bit more from everyone else here. And thank you very much for your insights, Father Michael.
Well, I can talk anytime, as Paul readily knows.
So I'd like to ask the question to everyone. So what has helped you become more integrated? And what challenges have you had with integration? And just, anyone jump in if you have an answer. Feel like there definitely has to be some people who have answers here. Marty, I'm going to call on you.
Okay, I can jump in, Richard. And I was thinking I was already taking a lot of space, but what helped me in integrating is what Father Michael also said, is that I felt there's a lot of pain, and that with everything that comes up, the only thing that I have to do is to feel the pain, to go and be somewhere that I can feel the pain and just be with it. And by being with it means that I feel the rejection of it, that I want to get rid of it, and then it transforms to something that I can allow myself to be the part that I was pushing away before. And the pattern there is that there's always something I don't like in myself, or that I don't like in my life, and that brings up a certain feeling, and I want to get rid of it. And by allowing it to be there and to be with it and to feel with it, to sit with it, I feel it transforming. And at that moment, I feel that there is something, what you called the shadow work, is brought to the light. And yeah, that I feel a little bit more whole in this, in myself.
Mm.
And what Father Michael said as well, like you can swim across the current. It also is that life is a current as well, and not always easy and simple, and can have a lot of rapids as well, and bumpy whatever. But life is showing where you have to go, and that can be painful as well, instead of just being on the side of the current. Yeah,
I think there's something interesting there about is countering the kind of avoidance that Father Michael was saying about, like this. And maybe it's why you have to, in some cases, wait until things get really bad, because it's only when it gets really bad that you're willing to actually do that difficulty of being with that kind of difficult feeling, or going out and doing something that produces difficult feelings, but which gets you further towards integration.
Yeah. And in practice, I think you don't have to look the situations up. The situations come your way, that you will be challenged. That's what life does.
They will come to, if you don't do the work yourself intentionally and deal with your pain in small, controlled ways through a regular practice. And it's what most spiritual practices is designed for, what most ascetical practices are designed for. If you don't deal with it in small ways, life will come up and bite you in the rear end. Yes. And then you'll be forced to deal with it on life's terms, not on your own. Yeah. So if you don't have a spiritual practice, find one, guys. It'll save your world of grief later.
Maybe I can jump in, Richard. I think the thing that has caused the most disintegration in my life and the most integration in my life has been my relationship to women. That's been the central thing. I spoke about it earlier, but I think it's such a key thing for us men. I think it was fed by the fact that I started at a fairly young age using pornography. And pornography, you're exposed to a massive amount of very, very large different variety of different women in situations and actions that you would normally, a normal man would not see ever. And so there's this kind of like spreading out of your attention. And I think that's led me into a specific lifestyle that really, it came right into my bedroom, into the place where I sleep, of course. And so it inflected me, it influenced me right in the heart of my life in some ways. There's a part of, it's in many ways, but it's quite obvious how like your sexuality is right at the center of one's life. And so then we have relations with different women, or with one woman that is influenced and changes this as well. And so for me, I rejected this idea of monogamy for a certain period of my time, and had this idea, bought into this kind of mainstream idea that love is love, and love doesn't want to be controlled, and you should just love as many people as you want to, and that it's all great. You don't lose anything if you experience jealousy. That's just you're trying to control or something like that, some kind of limitation on yourself. And when I let go of this idea, then I just experienced, or when I realized the folly of this idea, then I realized that life does want to be integrated. That's what love is, actually. Love is the coming together of things into being one. And the whole universe is trying to make this happen. And it is our delusions and our misunderstandings, and often our selfishness. Our selfishness is believing I'm an individual and I'm the most important thing in the whole world, and all of my life has to be all about me. And it's actually a delusional understanding. It's a mistaken state of affairs. You're not seeing reality the way it's supposed to be. And so when I was able to kind of put this aside, and then I think what Father Michael spoke about, then you can really strengthen this through a religious, spiritual practice. And I want to underline the word he used there, ascetic practice as well, because asceticism is where you intentionally put yourself in touch with something that's difficult for you. I'm wearing quite a bit of clothes here. My office is pretty cold. I don't know why, but for some reason, it's winter here in Denmark. I found that like sitting in a cold office, it's a little bit uncomfortable. And I get in touch a little bit with that kind of like a little bit of discomfort sometimes. That actually makes me much sharper when I'm doing it intentionally. And so there's something about like having a practice in your life. And this is what I think, this is why Orthodox Christianity was so attractive to me, because it's fully in there and it's unavoidable. There's not a lot of spirituality practices today. It's all about just like, abundance and enjoying yourself and everything being beautiful and wonderful. And what I found is intentionally embracing asceticism brings so much joy and love into my life that I love doing it. I love being in the cold here in my office. My wife thinks I'm crazy. And I go around sometimes turning down the heaters in our house. And she's like, Paul, stop doing that. Like, you're mad. So I've had to stop doing it in the house because she doesn't want to get on board with it. But so that's fine, right? But then I can freeze in my office. Anyway, so that's just my little input.
This is a technique I didn't expect to hear, is like turn your heating down for integration.
It's 14 degrees here at the moment.
Yeah, and even then, to go back to this is why my business coach suggests that fitness is the gateway drug to men's self-improvement. That is, if you can get to working out regularly, that can provide the kind of ascetical discipline that a lot of young men or even older men need. To make a plan, to stick with it, to go to the gym when you don't feel like it, to work out even when you're sore, delayed gratification because you won't see the results for a few weeks and everybody else will not see results for even a longer period of time. To stick with a program like that, those are character building traits. And those are the first benefits of learning to work out. And, they're not physical at all. They're character traits. Yeah.
Dietmar, I feel like you want to say something.
That's correct. Good that you sensed that. Well, I was thinking, when I look at these the questions, what do boys or men need in order to become real men and find their vision? I go to schools and teach boys about medical problems that only relate to young boys. And I agree with what Father Michael said. The young boys, like aged between 6 and 12 or something like this, they just need to be assured that they can become men. They need self-confidence. They look up to other men and feel, I'm never going to get there. So you just need to make sure that they understand that being a boy, becoming a man is an asset, and they will learn about that. But you just have to reassure you will get there, and you're good enough as the way you are, and you're going to get there. And the next group that I'm looking at is the men, like Father Michael said, they're grown and their neurobiological system is nearly adult. It's grown up completely. This is when the men need a good peer group. And the best thing that could happen to them would be a mentor, somebody they look at and somebody who stays with them and who provides them with information, giving tasks, talking about this, and somebody who really gives a good example for those men how to be complete in the way that you look at your life and the way that you lead your life. Now, this is really rare. This is very, very hard to get. And Maniphesto or other men's groups are probably a good way, because then at least you have your peer group, you have other men willing to get there as well. But most of the men, and this is the group that I deal with mainly, are men who have just neglected this because they haven't been in touch with themselves. They've never asked themselves the question, where do I go? Who's going to join me? Maybe they did ask the question, but they answered the second one first. They just looked for a woman because they were in pain. They didn't want to be alone. And so they had somebody who was joining them, but they still didn't know where to go. And on their way, they probably realized that this combination is not the right one. And then they crash down. And this is when they sometimes seek medical help. And then you really have to do the one-by-one work, starting with shadow work, looking at the problems that they developed during their life. And this is really hard to get to the core. So in my ideal world, we would start talking to boys in the primary schools, just telling them you're good, you will become a man, and if you follow somebody, you'll become a good man. And then make sure once they finish their development, their neurobiological development, they have contact to peer groups and mentors. That would be really a big achievement. And from my personal point of view, especially for the medical business, because we have so many diseases that are secondary to psychological problems that those men develop, and that could be avoided, at least in a large number.
That's beautiful. Thank you for saying all of that. And one of the things which you said when you're dealing with younger boys, you said to tell them that masculinity is an asset. Now, I know here in America, the sort of the woke culture, a lot of boys get very little positive affirmation for being male. No, men are the cause of all the troubles in the world. Men are somehow defective women. Everything wrong in the world is because of what men did. Why do you want to be one of those? And so the negative imagery and the messaging is very, very bad in a lot of public schools, media, television, popular culture. It's quite negative for boys. Do you find it as bad where you are in Germany, Dietmar, or the rest of Europe?
Well, we do have all the figures, like the crime that's been pursued by men. We do have all these figures when you could easily read through that men need help because they're bad. But I think this is exactly the way that we should approach this, because this is only because men don't really have the ability to develop masculinity in this good way, in this good sense. So we suffer from this here as well, of course. But I think there's a lot of movement now, especially in Europe, trying to make sure that we understand that this is only grounded on old experiences, and you can change that.
Good.
Did that answer your question?
It does, and it's hopeful, and I'm grateful for you saying it. I think we begin to see in America a little bit of the pendulum beginning to swing back a little bit. Yeah. I see some hopeful signs, but I didn't know how it was in Europe. So I'm glad to hear you say the things you say. Thank you.
From where I'm sitting, I'm glad we haven't really even bothered to talk that much about this problem, because I see it, like, especially war and conflict coming closer and closer to us every single day now. I think people are realizing, like, this isn't a stable way to build a society. Like, we need men, and it's so clear. Like, Ukraine's already pretty much run out of men. Like, they're busy having to hunt them on the streets, right? And so we need strong men. And I think that, even in the Danish government, they've gone very far down the line in some areas politically, but I think they're starting to realize, okay, we need to be a little bit more careful here, and men are needed. And so I really think, like, trying to go too much into this debate, like, let's just focus on being good men amongst ourselves, and if the rest of the world at sometimes figures out, I think they'll see it. But what we need is the good examples. We need to have men who are standing out as beacons of light and showing good, healthy, strong masculinity and brotherhood, especially the relationship between men. It's incredibly beautiful and powerful to see when men get together. This is the patriarchy. This is what the patriarchy is. The patriarchy is very, very old and very, very strong, and it's not about tyranny. That's the most dysfunctional. Tyrannies collapse, tyrannies falter, tyrannies never last very long. What lasts is loving, caring, supportive brotherhoods that lift men up and lift women up, and especially are aware of the needs of children, of boys and girls, and the next generation coming after them as well. That's what we need to be focusing on, and let the people discussing about all that other stuff do what they want to do.
I think to take this slightly back to practice, I think there's a useful ideal here, which is having ideals, having like Dietmar said, mentors, having examples, having archetypes, that when you look at them, you feel like, oh, if I was that way, there's a wholeness in you get a sense of wholeness from imagining yourself as that person, because you see them as an integrated whole, and having that imagery and having those real people in front of you mentoring you and so on is very powerful. And also having masculinity, like an issue with being anti-masculinity is it puts a man at war with himself, and that is disintegrating. And so having masculinity as an ideal then is an integrating kind of process.
Oh, and you said something also very beautiful that I want to underscore. There is that, yet for older boys to have mentors in their life means that the rest of us men have to be willing to serve as mentors and to take interest in other men's lives, you know. And that doesn't mean just us older guys either. I meant what I said earlier. Even some of you younger guys, look to the men who are younger than yourself and help them to grow up, because they look to you. They look to you. You know, some high school kid is going to look to, you know, to Dan at 26 years old before he's going to listen to some old geezer like me. You know, he'll have much more influence on him than I could. You know, so do that and know that you can do that and take some interest. And again, it draws us to be a mentor, draws us out of ourselves and puts our attention on the welfare and the good of another man, which is precisely what mature masculinity does. It serves another.
I want to
Hannes is shaking his head yes over here and agreeing. I'd like to hear from him and see if he has anything to add.
Me?
Was that
the mouse, but
from Magnus? Yes.
Oh, you say Magnus? Okay.
Yeah, no, that
I can't keep all of your dialects straight.
Yeah, no.
How would you say it in Swedish?
Sound doesn't exist in American. You know, it's and I think about languages. You said, you know, about how language is changing you, and I have this word now in my head about being beholden to a different set of standards, and that word, to be beholden, it's for me, it's extremely powerful. So that's one thing, just a quick reflection. Second, also we talked about the gym and the strong, and I would also like to mention endurance sports, running, which for me was transformative, and because it demands everything of you. It demands control of your food, of your planning, of your strategy, of your mental state, of your mind. And then there is the pain, because once, I mean, I ran ultra long distances, 50-miler and 100-milers. And after a while, it starts to hurt, and then it hurts a lot. And then you end up in somewhere else where you've never been before. And this is where it gets really interesting. And then the rage to get over the finish line. This is like this. It is absolutely transformative experience. Like, I am not stopping. Your whole body is screaming for you to just, this is it. We're done. We're dying. And you go, no, we're not done. And the rage and this thing to take it across. And people say, so why do you keep going, Magnus? And I was like, I want that answer and I don't have it. And I'm still looking. I don't know what it is that doesn't, so something that can be, I understand you get a much nicer ass when you do go to the gym, because long distance ass starts by the knees and ends up by the end of the back.
Oh, that's true. That is true.
So for the body wise, the gym is clearly much better and probably get you laid better. But it's apart from that, I can, if there's one thing that has really been transformative for me, it's just going out there and just almost killing yourself and realizing that you can go so much further. So that's one thing. And also just on a third thing, sorry, a lot of things today. Yes, younger men today, it seems that everything, the values are cobbled together. There's not very much to really stand on. And you get someone like Jordan B. Peterson, and he hands out 10 rules for life, and everyone goes crazy. It's like, someone is giving us rules. Wonderful. And there are, where do you get values from? You need to start somewhere. Is polyamory a good thing or a bad thing? And the answer is, well, it depends. And it's like, is there any way you can get an answer to, yes, polyamory within the relationship is good, or polyamory within the relationship is not good? And then you need to find somewhere to start. And I think that's that. I don't know, where do you even begin, right? You can encourage people and tell them that you're wonderful and you're fantastic and your masculinity is something extremely beautiful. And you built the whole society. Everything you see around you is built by men. We can say that, but then they say, okay, yeah, that's fine. But what I do with that information, and I think that's one thing that we're seriously lacking. There's no direction. There's nothing. This thing is better than this. So that's just it. Thank you.
Yeah, loverly. And the extreme running. First of all, I'm simply appalled at the very idea. I have very flat feet. I've never been able to run in my whole life. This is one of the reasons I pump iron in the gym. I don't have to run. But I do know, Paul will know who I'm talking about. I did meet at the European Men's Gathering a couple of times, a young man, Swedish man, who endures the cold more than anyone else I have ever encountered in my life. And just extraordinary things that it's astonishing to me. I asked him one time, I said, why do you do this? What's the attraction? Because I grew up in South Texas. I lived in an orange grove. I live in tropical climate. I'm freezing to death here in Michigan. I can't, I would die in Scandinavia. But this guy, I asked him, why do you do this? And he said, he had a very painful life growing up, and it's the only way that he feels close to God is to push himself that hard. And it was astonishing to me, his answer. I was not expecting that, but I get it. I get it. And that's there's an aspect of masculine spirituality. Women don't do this, but there's an aspect of masculine spirituality, which may not be particularly religious, but there's something, spirituality is fundamentally what you do with your pain. I think that's one of the best definitions of it. And if you
Michael,
can confront it like that. Yeah.
Let's finish there with that excellent point. We've hit the hour, and we want to be on time. But yeah, thank you everyone for contributing to this, and especially to you, Father Michael, for your insights.
Much obliged. Thank you all, guys. Fabulous.
And thank you, Richard, for hosting. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
Good work.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a great evening.
Father Michael, Richard.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
everyone.